Rohan, I think the most successful doctors that I've admired or I've looked on, in terms of like just they're able to achieve that life balance. Not just people who have a lot of money. I know a lot of people who have a lot of money, but they're not necessarily happy. But there's doctors out there that are genuinely sort of strike a nice balance. They become owners. They go stop from being just employees and they figure out some type of ownership and they start accumulating assets, whatever assets. Doesn't have to be any particular type, but they accumulate assets and they have to engage in some type of entrepreneurship or business. And when you do that, there's obviously struggle and work at the beginning, but what happens is you create enough surplus, excess, abundance that doesn't require you to clock in and clock out to create that revenue. And so with that, then you unlock the time freedom and you have the financial freedom.
What if you could reclaim hours of free time each week, create legacy building wealth, and devote more energy to your passion projects without giving up on your career as a life-saving MD? Dr. Vikram Raya is a functional cardiologist, high-performance coach, and real estate expert, is here to give you the tools, strategies, and solutions you need to transform your life, unlock your limitless potential, and achieve greatness, all while freeing up your precious time. Welcome to Limitless MD. Let's dive in.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Limitless MD. I'm your host, Vikram Raya, and today we're just going to have a conversation with one of my directors in Limitless. He is a director of marketing and sales. He's also really into AI, and we're just going to have like a robust discussion on a couple of different topics.
Yes, I'm excited for you. Really, within my job as director of marketing with Limitless MD, I have such a privilege to speak to so many physicians who are either our active clients or considering being a client. I feel like they ask me all these phenomenal questions, and since I have Vikram here today, I want to ask them to him as well. So it'll be a very robust discussion that I'm excited for.
Okay, cool, man. Yeah, let's do it. Let's open up the kimono and let's share a lot of cool information that we've learned from the 10,000 doctors that are part of the Limitless network, and the hundreds of doctors we've personally worked with as coaching clients, and so much of the sort of the movement, the questions, the zeitgeist of the physician population in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Vikram, when you first started, you were a cardiologist, which for most people, that's a very phenomenal career, very well respected, very well paid. What kind of motivated you to say, I'm looking for something different, despite my 10 years of training and my 10 years of work, like I still want something different. I guess tell me a little about that.
Yeah, I don't think I was initially looking for that. Honestly, when I got started and as a cardiologist in 2011, it was like I was just so excited. I mean, it was a dream of mine to be a cardiologist, and for so many years I was like, monomaniacally focused on trying to achieve this. And once I did, I was like, man, it was just elated. It was joy. But then when during the training process, it was a lot of hard work. And I'm not immune to hard work. I love working hard. I've done it for most of my life. But once I got out and started practicing, I noticed that, some of the things that I was hoping for didn't necessarily pan out. Like some of the salary expectations were not exactly what I was thinking, as I was in a very sort of metropolitan area, Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia. The commitment to being on call every week, every Tuesday, and then having like, a Q4 weekend call. Some of that was challenging as well, over time. At the beginning, I was fine. But, when you get into your 8th or 9th or 10th year, you're like, hey, is this what I'm going to do for the next 20, 30 years? And so these are the moments where you start questioning just a little bit. And then the other thing was, I'm a physician who has an entrepreneurial mindset, and I always have ideas. I always want to grow. I want to contribute. I want to add value to things. And so if I'm in the practice, I'm like, hey, what do we do this? Why can't we do this? Let's add this. Or how do we help these patients? Or can we create this product or service for them? Or, hey, you know what? I have a friend in that hospital system. Maybe our group can also go there too. And we can, or perhaps we can buy that group out and combine it with our group and grow. So like, it's always been my growing and scaling opportunities, and it's not like, hey, I want to be opportunistic. I want to have opportunities where it's win-win. And, for a time, I found some areas that I was able to do. I started like a pulmonary hypertension clinic. I started a heart failure program. I helped our group get into touch with another hospital system. And so we were able to, compete there as well. And, I got more referring doctors to come join us. I created a preventive cardiology program. And I found that exciting. Then I started marketing us as a preventive cardiology group. I did something called Cooking with the Cardiologist, which was a partnership with a local hospital that I used to work at, and our group, where we would teach people how to cook healthy meals. And then we'd do a live TV demonstration in front of an audience on how to, do these things. So, but at some point I realized that my, not necessarily my ambition, but my excitement and my growth were, I was coming up against a wall, because they would say, hey, that's great, but right now I want you to focus on seeing patients. Right now I need you to go see these chest pain guys. And so that was some of the dampeners on who I was as a person, right? And then the second thing was, in the hospital system, I noticed that there's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of incentives for doing things that probably were not the right things to do. Just like seeing consults just to see consults. Like anyone just mentioned the word chest and pain, that's an immediate cardiology consult. Anyone who had a slightly abnormal lab, they would call us. And I understand this would drive revenue and traffic and things like that, but intellectually it was not as stimulating to me. And so, I started then looking, okay, if I can't use my energies here, where else can I go? And so I started learning other things like functional medicine and real estate and things. Started exploring other options. But I mean, what have you heard, Rohan, when you talk to these doctors? What's their motivation for even reaching out to a company like ours, Limitless MD, where we help doctors, see beyond the stethoscope?
I think, Vikram, one thing that's interesting as a doctor is that there are a lot of trade-offs that you have to make, and there's some kind of slightly interesting ones where, for example, like in a lot of other professions like tech or law or banking, when you move into like a big city, a nice metropolitan area, you're actually making a high salary. Like if you're in New York or in Washington, D.C. The problem with the doctors is actually the opposite, to where in medicine, you want that rural coverage. So the problem is that option A is that you live in a rural area that pays you a lot of money and you make good income, but then you're not in the best place with opportunities. The other option is, what you were doing, Vikram, where you lived in a major metropolitan area, and while the opportunities were phenomenal, the income you were making was actually lower. And the problem is that the income is lower and the expenses are higher. So you kind of feel this like double squeeze on both
Sort of double
ends.
whammy.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is that really for any doctor, it becomes a decision you have to make. Option A, door number A is you put your head down, you work in medicine, you save up your money, you put it in like a whatever, like, bonds and stuff. And you probably by like 60, 65, maybe 70, you'll kind of be quote unquote retired. That's great. And, there's nothing wrong with that. However, many doctors I know want something different where they get to, having worked a couple of years, they're working really hard and they want to accelerate. They want to achieve financial freedom quicker, to where that's really the decision you have to make of, if you are comfortable just working as a doctor, retiring at 65 or 70, just keep that up. There's no reason to do anything. But if you want something different, you got to move quicker.
Rohan, I think the most successful doctors that I've admired or I've looked on, in terms of like just they're able to achieve that life balance, not just people who have a lot of money. I know a lot of people who have a lot of money, but they're not necessarily happy. But there's doctors out there that are genuinely sort of strike a nice balance. They become owners. They go stop from being just employees and they figure out some type of ownership and they start accumulating assets, whatever assets. Doesn't have to be any particular type, but they accumulate assets and they have to engage in some type of entrepreneurship or business. And when you do that, there's obviously struggle and work at the beginning, but what happens is you create enough surplus, excess, abundance that doesn't require you to clock in and clock out to create that revenue. And so with that, then you unlock the time freedom and you have the financial freedom. And then at the end, when you stop working as a doctor and you retire, you're done. Obviously, whatever you saved is different, but nothing of value was created in terms of an asset. But when you build a clinic, a real estate portfolio, an investment portfolio, whatever that is, or you have a new medical device and you have maybe licensing or royalties or intellectual property that you've created, then that can continue to give you income, indefinitely. And so that's, I think, the big difference. And so I think for the entrepreneurial doctor who wants to create something beyond their physical and intellectual skill sets that they trade in for cash, some type of entrepreneurship and asset building is needed.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, Vikram. So you kind of had this quote unquote epiphany, a couple years ago. How did you kind of first get into this? Like, where did you go to learn? Like, how did you figure things out? I know it was a different time back then, but I'd love to know how you kind of got started in this journey of like entrepreneurship and earning additional income outside of medicine.
I think once was, a lot of people have interest in opportunities, but they don't take action. And then number two is their mindset is not, they quickly shut down these ideas that they have before they let them sprout and take hold. And one of the things has been, I've been blessed to read a lot of really good books. And honestly, every time I've had a major shift, a book wasn't responsible for it. So I think the books have been pretty critical. The ones everyone talks about are, like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's been a really interesting one. And he's like the OG of like self-development and wealth mindset, affluence mindset, using like mentors and successful people as role models and really looking at the psychology of success. And another one, obviously, that everyone talks about, the Kiyosaki books, but instead of just thinking about Rich Dad Poor Dad, you read the whole trilogy, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, and Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. And it really, like, so many light bulbs go off in people's brains. And I think that was very critical. And then I would say going to conferences that are not medical and meeting people who are successful that are not in the medical space and just hanging out with those people, they have a different vibe, a different energy. And it was really cool to see that and sort of like glean off of that. And final thing is, I had a mindset coach. I couldn't afford it. I thought it was crazy. My wife thought I didn't know, what are you doing? But really having someone who's a high performance mindset coach and who was always whispering in my ear what is possible, would take my ideas and help me refine them, would help me stop my self-sabotage because I had a lot of critical beliefs about myself, and it would really stop, like halt those and question my limiting beliefs, and then believing in me more than I believed in myself. And so I had to even borrow that person's beliefs. And I think it was, at times it felt like therapy. I was just complaining or talking about something, but then sometimes it was strategizing. Sometimes it was like brainstorming. So it was like a thinking partner, a strategic partner, a friend, a person who believed in you, but it was also a person who could help you bring connections to the table and introduce you to folks. So all of that was, I think, very foundational when I was younger in starting my medical journey, to have that as like sort of like a sort of advantage.
Yeah, I kind of want to drill into one of those points, Vikram. You talk a lot about the power of like mentors and the different ones you've worked with. I think what's interesting is that, today with the advent of AI, you're still working with mentors. You're still seeking out people to help you. So I'm curious what your perspective on this is. That, with AI nowadays, you can ask any question, you can have access to almost any information you want to. Why are you still working with mentors and coaches and people to help you achieve outcomes?
Let's talk about AI for a second, though. I do. Obviously, I still have some coaches and mentors. I think I'll probably always have somebody that I'll always look up to or reach out. Not at every phase, but there's different phases where you need more support than others. But I also been leaning into AI. Like, I've really worked with ChatGPT and Claude now. Claude is really more my work engine to like do significant tasks and really do some deep analysis. But I still prefer ChatGPT for conversational capabilities, and it literally helps refrain everything. Like if you have and the thing is, like, you can sort of be as raw as you want to the AI, and it'll work with you, and then you can make it act like, like one of the cool things was I was like, who are my like top 9 people that I want to emulate? I have like Elon Musk, LeBron James, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Tony Robbins, who else did I have? I had in health, I had Dr. Mark Hyman, like all these cool guys, and I'm like, imagine if I took like the best of all of them, and I took their best attributes, and so that's what I sort of programmed my AI to like come back to me with. And like it's like depending on what I'm discussing, it sort of is my thing. Now this is all good, but when it doesn't replace the human contact. So I would say definitely use this as a tool, but if you're really looking to level up and grow to that next level, it's nice to have someone in your corner that's either been there, done that, or can guide you along that pathway and really focus on not only just mindset but just strategic action as well.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like where even though AI can give you infinite information, AI has never achieved anything, right? AI has never become financially free. AI has never, worked a day as a shift as a doctor. So still having that person who has been there and done that, they can help you cut through the noise because it's ultimately at this point, I think for every doctor is an incredibly hardworking person. You would not be in medicine if you did not know how to work hard. So it's not a matter of I need to do more. I need to work harder and harder, harder. It's about what are the things I need to start doing and what are the things I need to stop doing. So it's much more about refinement rather than more, more, and more. And I think that's one of AI's, faults, if anything, is that AI always has an answer, but you don't know if it's the right answer because it's never been bound in experience versus when you're working with an expert coach. They've been there and done that. They've seen what has happened. So they know when they're giving you advice, they're going to be able to tell you, you need to do these things, you need to not do these things. It just kind of, streamlines what you're able to achieve. Does that sound about right? Or has that been your experience?
Yeah, I believe that AI is integral to day-to-day activities and integral to every company's success, probably to your personal life as well. That being said, you cannot replace some of the consulting, the strategists, the mentors, the coaches, in different businesses. And what happens is it just AI, like just like the internet augmented everything, and then the iPhone augmented everything. This will just augment the current things, and obviously things will have to be done the different way. So, I think knowledge resources that are out there are probably not going to be valued as much because knowledge has become a commodity. You can have anything you want at any time you want. It's the curation of the knowledge and the strategic application of it and separating signal from noise, right? We have too much noise and not enough signal. And, the Uber entrepreneurs out there, like the Bezoses and the Musks, I think based on what I've read about them, they spend probably 2/3 to 3/4 of their day just on signal, and they have very little noise. They don't tolerate noise, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's so many famous examples. The one that comes to mind is Steve Jobs. He would always go for these long walks where he would, contemplate a problem and try to figure it out because at the end of the day, especially as you become a leader and you become, more of a strategic thinker, it's not about, outworking. All of us humans, we only have 24 hours in a day. There's, only so much, output we can give. It becomes much more, what do I need to prioritize? What do I need to do today? What are the most important things? So I think that's the value of coaches versus AI. Amazing.
What have you seen? Because you've talked to a lot of physicians, right, Rohan?
Yeah.
So, what do you think are their biggest challenges consistently, and how has
Yeah.
that evolved over the years? You think?
There's so many. I think there's so many. I think one of the biggest ones is a lack of clarity, and it's kind of surprising to say because you would think that physicians are very smart people, but I think that not a lot of doctors spend the time saying, "What do I want? Where do I want to be in 3, 5, maybe 10 years?" And then reverse engineering, what does that need to look like today? What are the things I need to be doing today? So I guess Vikram, maybe you can talk a little about that. How do you kind of think about setting 3, 5 year strategic visions and then reverse engineering to what do I need to do today? How do you kind of go about that process?
I used to for many years create a vision board where like just throw these big goals there, and and I'd have a longer term vision boards, but I would also have annual vision boards, and the annuals are like here's the goal. And what happens is it's not magic. What happens is you're consistently looking at that, and you're programming your subconscious brain, and you're starting to take actions toward it. You focus on what you want to go toward, right? And so it sort of pre-informs your decisions. It pre-informs how you take you know stock of your day, your what how you spend your weekends, all of that. So I think just declaring something and putting on paper and then looking at that every day is huge. So that's something simple everyone can do. And then obviously once a year is great, but what if you did once a quarter? Or what if you did once a week, once a day? So the more often you check in and going after something, the more likely you'll hit it. And so a lot of goals are nothing but like, even impossible goals are nothing but like, you know, bunch of milestones that are much more manageable. So the moment you can tackle those milestones, you make major progress toward your big vision. There's a really good tool I like to use called a productivity planner. It's by a company called Intelligent Change. I have no affiliation, but I like them. It's on Amazon. So I use that, and I use a quarterly planning one. So they come in like 90-day sort of chunks. And so I have my annual goals, and then I chunk them down into quarter goals, and then now I review them every week to see if I'm making progress, and then I create projects or tasks during the week to advance me toward those. And then really these bigger, BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, these big visions, these major transformative purposes. We coach and talk about all those things, but those are nice. But I wouldn't go beyond 3 years. It's hard to like really anticipate, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what's going to happen. Like if my life now, I could never predict that would have happened, 10 years ago, but I'm pretty good at maybe 1, 2, 3 year projections. And so I would do that. Now you can have a general direction of where you want to be in 5, 10 years, but it's hard to really plan for those, I think. And if you have even a hard time doing 3 years, just stick to 1 to 2 years. That's fine. Or 18 months, that's something you can wrap your head around, but get the clarity, because then you get to go fast and you get to go with purpose. And then honestly, what's getting in the way is all the other distractions. And so the key is just to say no to most things so you can say yes to the right things.
The topics that come out to me that are important are like, number one, what do I do? Because I think that's actually one of the things that surprises me. Like a lot of people don't have clarity in terms of they're thinking about real estate, they're thinking about this, they're thinking about that. Like, how does someone navigate and pick something that's going to get them, where they want to go? What is it? What's your any thoughts on that? Or, I mean, my thought is always you want to reverse engineer financially what you want to do, right? So what I always tell people is, okay, let's say you're making $300,000 a year, $400,000 a year, et cetera, et cetera. You need to be able to break down, okay, what net worth, what kind of assets do I need to be able to replace my income comfortably? I think that's a exercise that, most people don't do. What I always advise is the 4% rule. So take your annual income you want to make. Let's say you want to make, $300,000 a year passively, divide it by 4%, and that'll get you the required net worth you need to get there. It's surprising because you would think that's very rudimentary and simple, but 80% of the doctors I speak to have never done that exercise, and it really is important to understand that.
But I think the next this batch of doctors is getting caught into the let's replace my clinical income. I think it's going to be hard to replace my clinical income. Let's just be honest. Your clinical income is very strong. Some people make $500,000 a year, $1 million a year. It's hard to make that in another category unless you start becoming a category expert, a domain expert. So it's really, I mean, why not just take the excess money you're making and just learn to be financially literate first, and then financially savvy second, and then just you have your growth bucket, very safe. Then you have your so you have a conservative bucket, which is just safety bucket, growth bucket, and a speculative bucket. And if you start putting your excess cash into all these things, they'll start compounding and growing over time. And if you really have a passion and entrepreneurship, then you can go even 10x, and that's you learning an asset like learning, multifamily or student housing or, self-storage. That's in real estate. Or you can learn how to become an options investor, or, you know how to invest, you're a swing trader, or how to invest in growth stocks or dividend, or perhaps it's like you go into the medical side of business, right? There's a lot of success in medical side of business. And I've really been double clicking on that for a lot of my coaching clients, where I'm asking them, hey, why don't you get into medical office? Why don't you buy the building where you're renting from? Why don't you, instead of working for the hospital, start your own clinic? And then let's make that into an asset. right? And then there's people who can, consult on the side and make extra income there too. But again, that's more 1099. And then it's, a lot of people can be, they can be a silent partner in someone else's entrepreneurship venture because they're busy working as a physician. And then the other thing is just, hey, maybe I still want to be a doctor, but I don't like the format in which I'm a doctor. Then we go into telemedicine and locums and things like that, right? So I don't think all doctors need to be entrepreneurs, but they need to be entrepreneurial.
I think it's a gold nugget right there. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because, full on entrepreneurship has its own risk, has its own level of stress and, certain things that come into it. But if you at least start thinking entrepreneurially, I think it gives you a lot more control of your life. It's one of those things that if you're just like quote unquote in the system working, like you're at the whims of if you get fired, if this happens, if AI replaces your jobs, you're at the whims of it and you have no control. Versus if you're entrepreneurial, in my opinion, my definition of entrepreneurial is always looking for value, looking for what are the problems in the market that exist? How can I solve them? And as long, in my opinion, if you have that mindset, you become very adaptable and you have a lot of mental toughness because you can adapt to this rapidly changing world we live in.
What I was getting at is there's also, like you can run a full-time practice or you can be a full-time doctor and you can learn to buy laundromats on the side or invest in a car wash, like, or have a franchise like that keep accumulating and you have an operating partner and you can do that. There's a lot of ways where stay in your main course. The fact that you're a physician is one of the most powerful things you have going for you. And so, instead of cursing it or, wishing you were doing something else, like enjoy it, find ways to where you can increase the lifestyle design of your medical life. And then use this as a high powered vehicle to create a tremendous amount of wealth.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think a concept, Vikram, we talk about all the time is like ikigai, which is like finding like what you're good at, what the market needs, what's profitable. Maybe talk a little bit about that concept and how you guide people through finding. You just mentioned 28 different opportunities. How do they find the best one and pick the best one that's for them?
Right. I used to think you have to follow your passions, but sometimes that may not be the case. Maybe something that's creating a tremendous amount of revenue, liquidity, net worth, that you like, but you're not that in love with. Maybe do that as long as you can to create enough war chest, so then you have that optionality later to buy back your time or buy back options. But yeah, the concept of ikigai is really a Japanese concept. It's for your reason for being. And there's usually like, what are you really good at, right? And many people are good at a lot of things. So you want to rank, your top 3 to 5 skill sets. And then, what are you passionate about, right? And then and again, that's where you want to know what you're passionate about, but, that may not necessarily be the ultimate direction where you need to go, right? And then the third one is, what does the world need? And then the fourth one is what can you get paid for, and paid for well. And ideally, if you can get that sweet spot, you're done. Let's say I'm really good at trivia questions. I love being on TV, and there's the host for Jeopardy, just left, and people are so distraught with the world situation they like watching TV. All right, great. I'm going to be the next Jeopardy host, right? I'm good at trivia. I get paid for it. The world needs it, and I'm having some impact. I'm passionate about it. So that's how, like, an example of that. So and the thing is, you may not get all 3. I mean, you may get all 4. So 2 out of 4 is the low. Ideally 3 out of 4. And when you do that, what happens? You get hopefully you get autonomy, you get joy, you get proficiency, you get mastery, you get fulfillment, and you obviously hopefully get wealthy doing it. So that's really cool.
That's good. I think the last thing I want to leave this on is that many physicians I speak to, they're in medicine, which is meant to be a stable career. They have a very big desire for certainty. And when there's uncertainty, they feel a lot of fear and they don't know how to navigate it. Maybe talk through a little bit of, especially your journey, how you look about navigating uncertain conditions and, learning to make that transition from, someone who's employed and someone who values certainty so much to being more entrepreneurial and being able to live with uncertainty. I'd love to know your insights on that.
Yeah. And then, Rohan, can I talk about your background?
Yeah, sure.
Like, you decided not to take the certain path. You took uncertain path. Why don't you share about that?
So for me, about 5 years ago, I was making the decision of, whether or not I want to go to college. And as I'm sure you guys know, college is a certain path. It, has certain quote unquote guarantees. But for me, what I kind of quickly realized is that I want to have control of my life. I think at the end of the day, when I look at, some of my family members, some of my friends, like with them, when you're going down this traditional path, like you are within the whims of what happens, right? So you're within the whims of, do you get hired or not at this job? Do you get fired or not at this job? Do you get this certain promotion? I feel like you have the control of your life is so much at the whims of other people. I feel like for me, the reason why I've made the decision to, to dive into this less certain path is because I want to have more control. And specifically, I want to be able to go in and create value in different ways in different organizations, different companies, in different circumstances. Because to me, that gives you the most security. So it's strange in a way how the path to the most certainty is actually through uncertainty. Because if you learn how to live with uncertainty and you can navigate uncertain conditions, you're quote unquote like maybe not. Let's say there's a term anti-fragile. Let's use the word anti-fragile. Yeah, so you become anti-fragile because if you're able to navigate uncertainty and deal with it, then when this thing doesn't work out, you can go do something else. When a launch doesn't work out, you can go do something else. When this product line doesn't work out, you can go launch something else. When you get this challenge or something, you can go either push through it or you can pivot. So to me, I've personally found the difference in being a mindset approach of, okay, if you are truly valuing certainty, then yeah, like this whole entrepreneurship and like non-clinical elements may not be for you. But if you're willing to take a step back and your desire for freedom is more than your desire for certainty, then you should do that. I think to me, that's the mindset shift that it's really a decision you have to make either way.
It's the amount, the most successful, your success is dependent on the amount of uncertainty you can tolerate. Like, that's how big you can go. The people like Elon is, if you consider him the ultimate entrepreneur, I mean, he's probably going to be the first trillionaire in history. He has a great appetite for uncertainty, and it's insane, right? And so the person who's the most conservative, like I don't know, like let's say a librarian, who works at a county public library, they don't want uncertainty, and they're very fixed in what they want to do. So, and the thing is, over time, you can tolerate a lot of uncertainty at the beginning of your life, and then near the end, you start slowing down your uncertainty. You want more stability and certainty. So it's not black or white; it's a spectrum or gradient. And the way to think about it, it's instead of just saying uncertainty, it's like, hey, you're certain in your capabilities, but maybe you don't need the guarantees of a job or a school or an industry, because you're comfortable and confident in your capabilities. And it's hold on a second. I'm sorry. There's a loop called the confidence loop. So the more, and that this is what helps generate certainty. The more competence you are, the more confident you get. The more confident you get, the more competence you can become, and that all of that starts driving certainty. And you can have external certainty, which is validation and support and guarantees, or internal certainty, which is called faith.
All right, I think we're kind of on our time here, Vikram. I think this was an interesting session. I think really diving into some of the more higher level concepts, but in my experience, these are the things that hold people back. So I think it's very important that despite, we don't have the tactics of how to go buy 100 units of real estate or the tactics of how to go build a $10 million clinic, but if you can navigate these own things within your mental mind, you're set up for success and a lot better.
These are all resources we're lacking, in life, but the ultimate resources are our ability to be resourceful. And if you can be resourceful and you know what you want, you have clarity, and you have a big enough why and the hunger, you'll go get it. And you'll attract the right people to help you there. You'll bust through any obstacles and limiting beliefs, and you will be successful. So guys, with that, really excited to have these conversations with some of my key team members and share with you some insights. And thank you, Rohan. And until next time, guys, be phenomenal.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Limitless MD. If you found value from this episode, I encourage you to share this episode with a friend and let me know by leaving a review. For more information, make sure you check out the links in the show notes below or simply visit vikramraya.com. Until next time, be phenomenal.